that's a critical issue, and yet every time we go, we have to talk about it again because people are so convinced by the propaganda that says marijuana cigarettes contain more irritants and tars than tobacco. Whether that's ever true or not of the individual joint, it doesn't matter because marijuana smokers inhale much less smoke and they have much less irritation and inflammation. And then finally, at this moment, in this day, as we sit here in the year 2002, there has never been a lung cancer reported in a marijuana-only smoker. Never once. Now, there have been some lung cancers reported, and they're always in people who once, the most common pattern, which is smoking both tobacco and marijuana. In the 1960s and 70s, when I knew marijuana smokers, there was none of them who didn't smoke tobacco also. Now, there are many people who don't. There are many people who only smoke marijuana. But there is no evidence that people will develop lung cancer. Now, it's really a proper concern, because if you look at the cells, if you do a bronchial biopsy or you wash out the cells out of the bronchial tree, the cells of marijuana smokers show similar precancerous changes. It looks, however, as if we're very lucky, those of us who have smoked marijuana, because it's not going to lead to lung cancer. And there's been a recent, very large epidemiological study, which actually came to light in a NIDA meeting last August, in which people presented data. And somebody did a very large epidemiological study in which they looked at about 150 consecutive people who presented at a hospital with a cancer of some sort or other. And then they selected control groups who resembled the cancer patients in every possible way, except they didn't have cancer. And then they looked to see what were the risks that led up to the development of cancer. And no matter what kind of cancer it was, cancer of the lung, cancer of the head and neck, tobacco use and alcohol use were associated with an increased prevalence of cancer, but marijuana use had no obvious impact on the prevalence of cancer in this very large epidemiological study. So again, I think we're lucky. It turns out this substance, even though we deliver it in a faulty, dangerous way, that is smoking, it looks as if it has very little pulmonary consequence, and that's extremely lucky, because it might have been otherwise.
That's a huge point.
One of the best studies is that of Stephen Sidney, who worked for the Kaiser Permanente Institute. And what Steve found out, for a couple of years as they gathered data, they were able to ask people about their smoking history. And then that meant they had a very large cohort of people who told them whether they were cigarette smokers or tobacco smokers. And then they examined them for a variety of health consequences. And this was an early study which showed that the prevalence of cancer was not increased in these marijuana smokers. And then the other thing they looked at was what I told you before, that is the prevalence of pulmonary symptoms, the cough, cold, etc., etc. Here's what they found out. Heavy smokers of marijuana came to the Kaiser Permanente clinics with pulmonary complaints, fairly high rate. 36% of heavy marijuana smokers came with a cough or cold complaint in 1 year. 33% of non-smokers came to the clinic with a pulmonary complaint in 1 year. So we have very frequent coughs and colds and pulmonary complaints. If you smoke marijuana heavily, you'll increase that by maybe 3 to 4 to 5%. Now, I don't want to dismiss that. It means that heavy marijuana smoking is not good for your lungs, but the reality is it is nowhere near the hazard that tobacco smoking is.
It sounds like a witch hunt.
Well, one of the things that happened is that after the Schaefer Commission report, which we've talked about many times, in 1970, the Schaefer Commission says, it looks to us as if marijuana is a drug with a wide safety margin. Not completely safe. There's still some things to worry about, particularly in heavy smokers, et cetera, et cetera. And so the Schaefer Commission then recommended legalization, decriminalization.
Now this is Nixon's.
This is Nixon's commission.
This is Richard Nixon.
You know, we also sit here at a time about a month after some of Nixon's tapes from 1971 to 74 were transcribed, some more of them, and heard him say that the only people who supported marijuana and decriminalization were Jew psychiatrists. Nixon was so astonishingly anti-Semitic. That's what he decided, the only people. And he called it,
said that?
Yes, he did. And he called in Governor Schaefer to harangue him because he heard that the Schaefer Commission might say that marijuana should be decriminalized. He told him, well, of course, you're not going to say that, are you? And then he wouldn't let him answer because he feared the truth. And so the Schaefer Commission went ahead and said marijuana should be decriminalized for the simple reason that the greatest hazard to a marijuana user is the potentiality for arrest, as opposed to
so happy we alive. We together can survive. Stop the bullshit, stop the lies. And now's the time to legalize. Tell me, brother, tell me true. What the hell we gonna do?